And looking up and down the dais, we have a quorum, minus one planning commissioner. Disposition of the October 7th meeting minutes. Hopefully the commissioners have had a chance to review them. Any comments or questions about them?
I have none. I would move, though, that we accept the minutes as presented.
So we have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Wonderful. The disposition of the meetings are accepted. Cases. We have one case before us today. It is case number 21-05, Title 41, 280 East State Street. This is addition and renovation, Montel LLC. Director Riggs, do you want to start us?
Thank you, Mayor and Planning Commission members. I just sent you a memorandum. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or not, trying to describe this project. The applicant actually went to the Board of Zoning Appeals and received the following variances. He got a front setback of 8 feet where 25 feet is required, a rear setback 5 feet where 30 is required, right side setback of 4 inches where 8 feet is required, structural coverage of 40% where 30 is required, total lot coverage of 91% where 60 is the maximum allowed, and he got a variance from ACC 230401 to allow 8 residential units where 1 is permitted. This is an existing building, so a lot of these variances were approved because the building's already there and it just didn't meet the current setback requirements in the code. The one change here that you see is that they now have a variance for 8 residential units. This is a B1 zone, but it's adjacent to an R1, so the R1 requirements they supersede the B zone here. So we took a opportunity to look at the plans that you received as well, and we had a couple of comments. We thought that the the existing drive approach on East State Street is okay, but the existing entrance in from Alexander Street is really close to the intersection, and we feel that that's not safe for free traffic movement. We're requesting, the staff would like to request that entrance be closed or relocated to a safer location. There were 2 parking spaces that in our review that really don't meet the requirements. Parking space number 29 and number 30. Those are up against the little outbuilding, and they actually go into the right-of-way and into the drive aisle on Alexander. We did some calculations, and they still meet all of the parking requirements if you remove those 2 spaces, so we're asking if they remove that from the site plan. A couple other comments. The existing sidewalks are going to remain, with one exception. They're installing a new ADA accessible access onto the, I guess it would be the west side of the building, where it's not currently ADA accessible. Public water and sewer connections will remain the same. There won't be any connection fees, but the developer will need to pay a capacity fee, and we'll calculate that for them at a later date. The existing storm drain systems and all the amount of stormwater will all remain the same, but we'd like to see some water quality control, best management practices on the site. And then just a note, the building's going to need state building department approvals and probably need to be sprinkled. We would ask that, I think this is currently 3 lots here platted. We'd like to ask the developer to replat that into a single lot, which just makes it simpler for everybody. And then the other comment is the landscape plan that they've submitted. The requirement is that my calculations is the requirement would be that they need 14 trees on the site. They're showing some trees in the right-of-way, some ornamental trees that really don't count as shade trees on the site, but they really don't have any shade trees on the property where 14 are required. And then shade tree, we'll send this to Shade Tree Commission on the 4th of November if the client, if the applicant wants for their review and comment.
Very good. Would anyone who's here today with us like to speak to these plans? Additional comments?
No comment.
Okay. Very good. The suspense rise. Commissioners?
I agree with David. I think that they should do something to move they should move the Alexander Street entrance way into the parking lot further to the north, or bring it in off the alley if that's possible and legal to do. I just think it's way too close to that intersection as well. I'm a little concerned about the handicap parking spot on the what would end up being the east side of the building. Is it used as a parking space today in the current situation? I mean, I just think to back in or out of there onto East State Street probably is, I'd like to see that parking space, the handicap parking space, incorporated into the parking lot somehow. And I mean, I haven't looked at the floor plan to see how they get it, you know, where the handicap units or unit is located, but I would hope there'd be a way to deal with that personally. I just think backing out there doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
If you don't mind, please respond to that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name's Kurt Mono. The purpose of that particular spot, that is an existing driveway,
Right.
just so you know. But the purpose of that existing spot, there's an existing doorway that would lead to an apartment directly off of that doorway.
Mm-hmm.
So there would not be a shared entrance. So what this does is allows actually an occupant to get closer to their doorway as opposed to throwing them out into a parking space, and then they would be required to go through the front of the property on the public sidewalk and then go up that concrete drive as it exists today to get into that unit, if that helps you.
Yeah.
I understand your concern of backing out onto traffic, etc., but that is an existing parking area that currently exists.
Right. Well, you know, so, and I understand it's an existing spot there. I don't know, it seems to me, though, that one of the values in you repurposing the building and adding parking lot is that maybe we can make improvements on things that are currently there that would, you know, make things safer and better. And I just, you know, I understand it's nice to be able to park right at your front door. I don't know, you know, if you could take out, if you took out some of that concrete in there, you could probably put a couple of trees in there and better meet the needs of the Shade Tree Commission. I don't know. It just, I'm concerned about that.
I don't disagree with your concerns. The only thing I would like to just convey in regards to a layout and logistics point of view is that is really our only access point to that corner of the property, because our existing building lays on the property line. We're within 3 inches of the property line.
Yeah.
So we have no other point of access for that quadrant of the building. So I would just ask you to consider that as you're speaking, as you're you know, consuming what you see presented. I completely understand your concerns. It's just the complications of the existing building and where the property lines lie as well. So.
Well, and I think you still can have that access. There could be a sidewalk that goes up to that door and everything. I think you could still have that access, but that's just my thought about it.
So there are those two ADA parking spaces that are near the back, and as you had indicated, it's near an entranceway to get into that first floor universally designed unit. And then there's also ADA parking closer to the front door entrance in off of
Correct.
East State Street. Yeah, I can see that. I can't tell if that's,
So the intent, you're right, the intent is obviously to have multiple access points in regards to handicap parking.
yeah,
The front handicap parking in regards to use really lends itself to the business use to make sure that obviously we have an open space available for anyone within the business use zone there. My thought process of moving the handicap parking as desired into the general parking lot is, then we open it up to general use, and we're starting to possibly limit that to that specific handicapped apartment that really needs its own space, right? If that makes sense. You know, we're open to ideas. The purpose of the handicap towards the alleyway is that actually we intend to have handicap accessible sidewalk at the rear of the building with access points off of the alleyway for those lower ground floor apartments there.
okay.
So that was the layout thought process.
Very good. Just as an kind of an educational moment for everybody, you know, I would encourage people to use terms such as ADA accessible as opposed to using the term handicap, because it's frowned upon within the community, you know, to use something like that. So we're talking about ADA accessible points in units. Very good. Other comments, questions, or concerns? I appreciate the comment from you, Director Riggs, when it comes to, and I'm always learning something new, an ornamental tree versus a shade tree. So that's what's going to be recommended, is that, yeah, that these become true shade trees.
I would leave that up to the Shade Tree
Shade Tree
Commission
Commission.
to make that decision, but it'd be my recommendation to not consider those as existing trees, to be counted as shade trees.
You know, I know this probably can't go in with this design, or maybe it can, I don't know. But to the point of the storm drain, you know, if you've noticed on Stimson Avenue, where it's being completely rebuilt, and thank goodness they've got the base course down already on both lanes, and now soon to have the whole project done. My point being, though, is you probably noticed those biocells that look like big concrete boxes, and those will have, you know, some aggregate in the bottom. There will be dirt put in there. There'll be shrubs and plants planted in there, but they serve to mitigate runoff. I shouldn't say it's not going to mitigate runoff. Runoff's going to be runoff, but as runoff is sheeting off of the parking lot and to the sidewalk, and then ultimately down into the storm drain, you know, via the gutter, these planters, you know, by design, you know, capture that water as it's running off. It filters through the substrate, you know, through the surface soils and the substrate, and then it goes back into the gutter on the street and then into our storm drain system. And you know, it's talking about best practices. And I don't know, I think maybe the city planner who is with us today can speak a little bit more to that, and whether that's something that is certainly worth exploring. I know you do have a grass median, do you not, between the sidewalk and the curb, or not? I don't remember. Yeah, which certainly helps. I mean, it's dirt.
Yeah, I apologize, Mayor, I was looking at potential spaces for shade trees on the parking lot.
Very
You
good.
were commenting there.
Well, I think I captured it all. I was speaking to those biocells that we have on Stimson Avenue. We have one down, or several down on West
Yeah.
Union Street.
They've been very effective, yeah, good way to clean and treat the water, just
Clean
like
and treat
David
the
was saying. Yeah,
I'm concerned about the parking with this whole thing. And I understand you gotta have parking spaces for the apartments and things, but now we've got all these cars that, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars. If you eliminate 29 and 30, you got 6 cars that are backing out onto the street. I don't know, it's a concern I have, the way that's. I'm not saying there's another solution to it, but I'm disappointed that we're not gonna make, we got people riding bicycles on East State Street, and maybe up Alexander, and cars backing out. It just is a challenging thing. I'm just concerned about it.
Like right now, there's all these pooling off.
Yeah, yeah, this is all open, right? It's a little bit dangerous to come in and out of Alexandria.
If the trees aren't possible, I'm just curious, as I'm new to this, are there exemptions made to the amount of parking spaces required then? Or if there's not currently 14 trees and you enforce 14 trees that affect parking spaces, how does that?
They would still need to meet the parking spaces or get a variance from this board or not for parking.
Parking would be 23, so that would be Board of Zoning Appeals action.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I was on the Shade Tree Commission for maybe 6 years, something like that. So they'll often, because of the nature of this community and it being built out and, and the remodeling, they will often allow a developer, some leeway in terms of meeting the requirements. I think they want to make sure that the developer has made an effort to try to provide shade trees on site. And then after that, they'll allow the developer to bank those trees. So they would provide money to the city, and the city then could put those shade trees in some other location.
Okay.
So that, and they've been pretty good about that. I think they're pretty good about looking at the project, and when this one gets there, I think they'll look at the project and realize, the importance of parking and the fact that the site is tight, and and be receptive to looking at some kind of variant other than providing 14 trees on the site.
Okay, thanks for the lesson.
Nancy? Nothing? Okay. We can vote on this, since it is a case, correct? We don't need to necessarily come back again. But we can also have things be conditional in terms of our vote, because there are several items in here, shade tree for one, the storm drainage system, for best management practices for storm drain runoff and sheeting. I know to your point, John, the parking spaces.
It's a hard one. I mean, I try to look at that. I'm an architect by training. I try to look at that to see, what is possible, and I don't know that if you need that many parking spaces, I don't know that they haven't found the solution that works, and maybe the only solution that works. I don't know. But I'm still concerned about the one on East State Street. I'd rather see a curb cut eliminated when we have the opportunity to eliminate curb cuts, but that's just my thinking on that.
Yeah, I concur with that. Well, if there's no further comment or questions, would someone like to make a motion to approve pending, again, curb cut, shade tree, the existing storm drainage, or water control, water quality control, best managed practices, and noting your concern over the parking.
Yeah, I'll vote to approve everything Mayor Patterson just said, pending everything from, yeah, everything that we just discussed, I guess. Do I need to repeat it?
Nope.
No? Okay.
No, I don't know that I can repeat it. Can I get a second?
Didn't you just second it?
I motioned it.
And did you do a second?
Second it conditionally?
So can I ask a question? Is this motion basically saying we want them to take away a curb cut there on East State Street or not?
Yes.
Okay, it is? Okay. Yeah, then,
Yeah.
okay.
As long as that works with. So that we're all-
Sorry,
so that
yeah.
we're all clear.
I'm okay with keeping the drive as is based off of the accessibility to that apartment so that they don't have to walk around the building onto the city curb. So I'm actually okay with that driveway accessible as is, actually. So,
Okay.
sorry to not be clear on that.
So as a part of your motion is not requiring that curb cut to be removed?
It's not, sorry, I was just
Okay.
motioning that I'm
Okay.
okay with everything that's listed here if they
Okay.
correct these things.
Okay.
So the curb cut in question is the one that's on Alexander.
No,
It's right
the one
here.
I'm talking about is the one on East State Street.
East State Street.
Yeah, it comes up to the, it's basically on the east side of the
And this is-
building that protrudes out.
And this is where the door is to that apartment, is at the end of that, they're saying.
Right.
And so you'd have to walk from here around here to get into that apartment.
Just to note, the staff comments did recommend, or express concern about the Alexander Street driveway being too
Driveway.
close to East State Street. And so the potential of moving that closer towards either the middle or towards the alley.
That's what I thought the issue
Yes.
was.
no issues with that.
Okay.
And that was part of this recommendation.
And
That's
you're
correct,
advising
yes.
your-
So I'm saying everything you recommended, I
Oh,
agree
gotcha,
with.
okay.
No, we're all good. So asking for a second. I will second. Any discussion, further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nancy, I think I heard an aye.
Almost. I just am concerned.
Did you vote yes?
I don't know what.
Oh, okay,
I mean, we have to trust that it'll go through
Yeah.
the process, and I guess
Okay.
I trust that it'll go through the process. And does that exclude the one on the crew cut off of State?
The curb cut off of State is not being recommended as a part of that motion to be removed.
Okay, so there's no way it can come back, it can be kept.
It can be kept.
It can be
It
kept.
is going to be kept with the approval.
It's the Alexander.
Alexander's nothing, I mean, it's used that way. Alexander's something, but it's not everything, I should say.
So let me, let's do this via show of hands, so that we're all being recognized, all in favor of the.
Supporting the motion.
Supporting the motion.
Could we reread the motion then?
Pardon me?
Could we reread it? So I make sure that, I was listening.
Okay.
It's,
So here, do you guys see the picture? You want to pass that around? This is that's the doorway to the apartment, and that's the driveway.
And it's a single vehicle parking space.
Right.
So
So,
only one, there couldn't be more.
I was just looking at if we don't, just how to access that otherwise. So I just wanted to see it visually.
But the bottom line is there's no control over who uses that parking space, really. If the tenant is gone anybody can pull in there and park, you know, dropping off groceries in their apartment, and then, you know, and I know that it doesn't, that door only goes to one apartment, you'd have to go around the building or something like that, but I, you know, I don't know. I'm concerned about it. Like I said, I like the idea that we have this opportunity to make some improvement, and fewer curb cuts on East State Street, I think is a good thing. I don't know, and just to have one curb cut for one parking space, it just doesn't seem like that's the, I'm concerned about that, that's all, anyway. But, so this requires, 3 yes votes today to pass it, is
It
that
does.
correct? Yeah. And right now, there's 2.
Well, and a maybe.
Well, it's clear that it's not gonna hold them up, is it? They can go to the state and get their plans as we're resolving, can't we? Or until you get your third.
Right. I mean, I'd have to
I don't
make some kind of revision, but.
Well, they could still go to
State.
the Shade Tree Commission, and they could come back when Andy's here, and if Andy supports it, Mr. Stone supports it, then it's, it would be a 3-2 anyway, and that would pass, right?
Let me just ask this before we continue down this path, and, you know, so yes, tabling it is an option. There could be a motion to table, or amending the motion to table. Is there any way to rethink that one singular parking space to where it, instead transition an ADA parking space, you know, where you already have it indicated on here, if I'm not mistaken, having an ADA parking space on the west side of the building closer to East State Street, where you have one indicated already, if I'm not mistaken, where there's an ADA space there.
Is that apartment an ADA accessible apartment, or is it just a general apartment?
That is, that, good.
I'm Trent DeBruin, VSWC Architects here in Athens, Ohio. So the intent and with Kurt's project was to make 3 handicap accessible units on that first floor. And so the intent was to have the 2 rear apartments open up toward the alley and make a handicap space there, and then at the front corner there to make a handicap area there as well. And so with it being an existing driveway and existing parking lot, it seemed to make sense to do it that way. I certainly understand your concerns about that, but I think the other thing is personally, I back into all my spaces. And so, you know, I guess another way to look at it is instead of pulling in, you know, maybe Kurt puts in his, you know, in his lease with the person that says, hey, if you're gonna park in this space, you know, maybe you back in. And that's a requirement of that, and if you don't back in, then you're gonna get feed, or, you know, there's gonna be a fine or something that he can possibly assess or something like that. But I think that if they backed in that would make it a lot safer. My other concern is that if we do put the handicap parking on where the large parking lot is, I think obviously we're already getting a little tight there with our parking spaces, but then the route to get from that parking space, you're going around the front of the building and back that way, and I guess my thought was to help the ADA personnel in the community that having a space close to their front door, specifically if the weather's not accommodating to that day. I think that would be the concern that I would have, and obviously those are considerations that have to be made by people and how they're interpreting that. But those were my thoughts.
So, thank you, I appreciate that. So this space, again, just so, again, we're all thinking the same way and understanding this correctly, that will be designated an ADA parking space. So therefore, only someone who has ADA license plates or a hang tag, they are the only vehicles that can park there. So, you know, to your point, I mean, it can't be anybody just randomly pulling in there.
Okay.
Otherwise, they'll be cited under the city's code and issued a ticket and possibly towed if it's not someone with the proper identification on their vehicle. I have to say, acknowledging the issue of a parking space that has probably been there since, has that already exists, that curb cut there? So it's been there for a long time.
It has.
And I'm sure that there's been vehicles
that.
that have parked there for a long time as well. And I have to, having served as, the chair for the Athens Commission on Disabilities, I have to say, I really appreciate that, because one of my chief concerns has always been reasonable accommodation is such a loose term and can be oftentimes used to the betterment for someone who's not living with a sundry of disabilities, whatever that disability is. And to have a parking space that is going directly into a doorway that is for a, universally designed apartment unit, and it's only striped as ADA parking, period. Again, that comes with its own legal consequences if someone chooses to park there and is not authorized to park there. Again, I'm not opposed to this, given the level of accountability that you have shown to recognizing that individuals living with disabilities are constantly not being addressed and being fair treatment, equitable treatment to people who do live with disabilities. So that's my, I'll get off my soapbox because I'm pretty passionate about individuals living with disabilities and having fair and equitable access to living arrangements, to parking, to entrance into this building.
So, but this apartment will not be limited to a person who has a disability. This apartment will be rented if there is a able-bodied person who wants to rent it. And if they don't have a disability, the only thing we're saying is then you can't park there.
Right.
That's the only thing we're telling them they can't do.
That's right.
And they will. If, and the only way that somebody will be cited for that is if somebody complains, right? Okay, so Mayor, I see you really support this thing. I'll go ahead and vote yes on and let it go. I do think we need to look at how we can improve traffic flow in our community. And, I go out East State Street a lot. The traffic gets backed up at different hours. Now, I'm not complaining because it's not like rush hour or something like that in a major city. But the reality is, I'm concerned. We have an elderly population, and I'm just worried about if we can reduce the number of curb cuts. I think that's a good thing. But so I'm concerned about it, and I would like the developer to reconsider maintaining that parking spot there. But I won't stand in the way.
Well, let me ask this. Because I think for, little additional cost on this project, you raise a good point, right? And I'll certainly acknowledge that it could be rented to an individual who does not have a disability. And therefore, still becomes an issue with spaces, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
I'm passionate like you are about making sure that, because they don't get treated well. That segment of our population doesn't get treated well. So I'm supportive of what you're saying there, but anyway.
What? Director of Code, if someone had the required number of spaces, and this space being one of them, yet if an individual who does not have an identified disability to where they have a hang tag or license plates to have access to that space, could that space, have a gate or be chained off? Or it is not a parking space to someone who doesn't have, who's renting that unit but doesn't have a disability?
I don't see any reason why you couldn't block that, why the property owner couldn't block that space if that condition occurred.
That's a property owner question as well, you know. Is that an option? If it still meets everything in code, just thinking this through and trying to,
I think anything's an option, but what I would keep in mind is the way these ordinances are designed, they're going to lend themselves, the ADA compliance that we're trying to do is going to lend themselves to a specific population that's going to need that space.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know we can sit here and say, well, what about this or that? What I would tell you is the percentage of occupancy on that first floor specific to the ADA population is going to be extremely high, and because that's the target market that we're going for. I would just ask you to keep that in mind when you're considering this.
okay.
You asked, you did not ask for a variance on the number of parking spaces with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
No, that was not perceived as an issue as we went through.
Okay,
the process. It was
and
not.
that parking space was included as a part of
That is correct.
I also believe that you could have somebody in there, in that apartment, who does not have a disability or doesn't fall under the ADA regulations, but as a guest who does, and so but I just think that, when you move in and you know where the handicap parking spaces are, the ADA accessible parking spaces are, you make your judgment then when you move in. And I still like the idea of eliminating that, but I won't stand in the way
Yeah,
of that.
the only thing is, that I would interject is the likelihood of us renting that specific unit to the ADA population, if you remove that space, actually drops tremendously.
Yeah.
Because you're creating a barrier to entry for that specific unit. I mean, so if you want to, as far as actual rentability to that population, you are limiting that by removing that space. And that would be a direct effect of what you're saying. I know that's not your intent, but that's the reality, because the distance from the parking to the actual unit is much larger, and I just do not see that population thinking that they could traverse that distance. It's not going to be palatable.
Yeah.
I told you, I'll go yes on it, okay?
Is there a requirement that they back in? Or is that just Trent's?
I don't think
preference?
backing in is you don't,
I don't want it, no.
I would rather them pull in and then try, and watch traffic in both directions and try to back out.
So it's not.
As opposed to pulling up and, and swinging the car across the center line and backing into the space or whatever. Or if you're coming in the direction heading east, how do you back into that space without going into the other lane? I think that it's the
I don't
wrong
want
thing
it
to
to
do.
be.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong thing to do, personally, but that's just me.
So no restriction on
I would say no
directionality
restriction.
of someone
No,
parking in this space?
No.
Okay.
But I wouldn't mind, once this thing is done and developed, a year later, that the owner come back and tell us how those apartments are rented. Are they full? And do they have people with ADA problems or that fall under the ADA guidelines? Are they the ones renting the apartment or not? It would be nice to, to get some feedback on something like that so we know how that's happened, what's happening there, so.
And not making that a requirement in this motion, but
No, but.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that would be
I'd like to
valuable as
just
well.
see how that all, works out. I think it's a nice location. Somebody with a disability has the opportunity to go to, the cafe that's there. There's a small grocery store that's there without needing to have a car so I think it's a great location for those. I'd like to see if that's how they get used or not.
Well, maybe we can ask for you to come back in the future when this is built out and leased out, and get an update if you're willing to do so.
Sure.
I think it'd be interesting for me as well. Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve pending shade tree, storm drain.
There's moving that entrance. We talked about trying to move that entrance. I don't know how well you can do that, but I mean, you got cars pulling in and backing out all the way down that street. But that was one of the things that they said they would do, so I'd like to see how they do that. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
Has the flooding problem on State Street been resolved, the one in front of Kindred Market?
Flooding.
Well, I think it was a temporary thing, but we did have a problem.
I'll have to check in on that.
I was thinking we were going
We had a flash flooding issue there this summer, the same time we had the flash flooding issue on Richland Avenue, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a slight dip right there on the pavement, if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe that's been resolved, but I think it's relatively infrequent, or it's an infrequent event. Might become more frequent with changing weather patterns, though, for sure.
to. At least there's no expansion of parking area.
Right,
It's
right.
not. And,
All right, so again, I would like to call for a vote on approving, pending the several issues that were discussed. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposition? Okay, your project passes 4-0. Again, pending shade tree and storm and relocation of that curb cut on Alexander. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you, commissioners. I mean, this is how this is supposed to work, is we will, walk through things. Communications, I'm gonna start with the Director of Development and Code Enforcement, Director Riggs.
I just wanted to note that we have a Verizon Cellular has asked to put some micro towers in. Those are all going to be done as part of in the code office. AT&T has already had 6 micro towers proposed to go in, and we've been working with the Engineering and Public Works Department to get those located correctly. We'd like to co-locate those with existing light poles or existing power poles rather than having standalones. But you should be, the city should be seeing more of those as the demand for cellular service continues to increase. That's all I have.
And Director Riggs, so you're still waiting to see where the locations will be?
Yeah,
for
we
these?
have. We've just got the request. We don't know exactly where the locations are going to be.
Okay, that would be
It's
interesting.
throughout the city is what they'll say.
That'll be interesting to track. Because they have to be within a certain distance of each other because of the wavelength that they're riding on.
That's correct.
Right.
Right.
There's a request this morning I received on that too that I forwarded to you. I think Stimson, Home Street, and they want to put three small cell in. Yeah, I expect there are going to be a lot more coming our way.
Yeah,
Right.
along that same lines, we have not seen any request for the 5G service, although we expect that to happen sometime soon.
So what are these towers? They just attach to the top of a light pole, meaning they don't have to be as high up?
They can. They're actually pretty small units, fairly small units, smaller than a basketball. The standalones will actually have their own pole and stuff attached to it. That actually clutters the city's right-of-way, so we prefer not to do that if possible, but they do need power. So you have to find them something where they can get power. Either our light fixtures or a lot of times they connect those with the traffic signals as well as on the utility poles.
And they also request an address, if I'm not mistaken.
They have to have
they
an
need a
address.
physical address, which can be very complicated when you've got 12 and 14 and across the street's 13 and you're running a pole that's between 12 and 14 on a street. But for E911, they're asking for a designated street number. Yeah.
But, I think that the numbers of towers and the numbers of those things, in a lot of ways, I see as a negative. But obviously, the service that they're providing is a positive. And I know when I was at the university, I had lengthy discussions with the provost and other people at the leadership of the university as to, how do we balance that, and how do we, what's important, and how do we deal with that? So, I know that's growing, and people want better service, quicker service, and all of that. So, anyway, I commend you for looking at those and trying to minimize how much they produce clutter and that kind of thing. So,
Thank you.
Just one last comment on that note. I was at a conference in Los Angeles 2 or 3 years ago, and looking up at a lamp post there in Los Angeles, and it had the gear of what looked to be, 10 to 12 different small cell antennas up there. And that's Los Angeles, and I get it. But but I've also seen them in Dublin, Ohio, to where it's a freestanding monopole with something that kind of bows out at the top, and the antenna gear is inside there as well. And that, in particular on Court Street, is something that I would like to avoid and see where else small cell can be deployed. But sure, I'm all in favor of 5G and stronger communication networks, but again, sometimes it comes with a aesthetic cost. I was involved in for quite some time with a number of cities here in the state of Ohio when the preemption came down from the FCC, from the Fed, saying you have little say over where these go in the public right-of-way, taking away our authority to control our public right-of-way. Paul, the city planner, Paul Look.
Yes, Mayor.
Any updates?
A few comments for this afternoon, the first of which timely to the discussion with the Planning Commission today, but my intern Dakota Fox and I, we are working on our ADA transition plan, Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan, which is a required federal document. I think I mentioned that last couple weeks ago. He and I are going to meet via Zoom with a few members of the city's Disability Commission tomorrow to discuss our plan moving forward and get some initial feedback before we start any assessments. One thing I do want to note that he worked on, which I'm incredibly impressed with, we have to basically inventory all city buildings and public spaces within the city that have any public access to it. So a building like this, we need to be measuring the doorways and things like that to make sure that but also if a doorway opens and closes, how quickly it does so, all of those things. And there's this very long questionnaire that we're required to do for all of these sections, for everything we analyze, as well as document it with images. All we could find were very expensive software suites to do that for us, or basically use pen and paper and a clipboard. And so Dakota developed for us essentially an input system so that he and I or any other volunteers, we can do this using our phones. We can inventory everything, take a picture, etc. I absolutely cannot believe that we were able to accomplish that, so I'm really pleased with the work he's been doing for us. We're going to give some of that to the Disabilities Commission tomorrow. We do hope to have this project done. We think we can probably get most of the inventory work done before the end of this year, and ideally want to bring forward a draft document for City Council roughly April of this year, or April of 2022, to get that moving forward so that we can have that on the books. Also of note, starting to work with Molly Fitzgerald from the Athens County Economic Development Council on what's called a Vibrant Communities Grant relating to the Athens Armory. That's a program through Ohio Southeast, which is an Jobs Ohio economic development arm of the state, to help moving forward with brick and mortar funding for the armory. So we're feeling pretty confident about that. We have had multiple discussions with representatives from Ohio SE to move that forward. Also of note, several of us have been working over the last several months on it. We are interested in working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to do to update a study of the Hocking River Channel project through the city of Athens Should be noted that that channel project was completed in 1971, so this year is the 50th anniversary of that project. There's a few things that we're really interested in looking at, one of which, of course, is safety issues near the Whites Mill Dam, where we all know there's been several drownings in the last few years, which we want to avoid happening into the future. We're also seeing increased stormwater runoff and issues near or along Coates Run on Richland Avenue. And then we're also interested in improving the environmental aspects of the corridor of the channel project, and ideally looking at some recreational features for the channel. So very preliminary right now, but we did have, I had a few members of the Army Corps of Engineers from the Huntington office. They did come to Athens on Tuesday, and myself and a few others, we spent the morning into the afternoon looking at different areas of the channel to discuss that with them. And then we're going to start conversations about a possible study, and then we'll likely, should we move forward with that, we'll be doing some sort of a lot of public engagement and workshops to get some feedback from the community as what they might want that river to look like into the future. We believe it can be a true asset for the city, and I'm kind of looking at it and saying, well, it's served us very well for the last 50 years, but how can we make the next 50 years of the Hocking River Channel be just a true asset for us, a place that we want to go to, and see kids skipping stones and people canoeing and fishing and all of that on the river. So a lot more to follow on that. And lastly, our other intern, Hunter Ewell, she is taking a deep dive into all the census data using GIS. She's comparing the 2010 census blocks for the city of Athens with the 2020, and we're kind of trying to analyze for differences of what we've seen, and also looking at just some general reporting on what the census data so far is telling us about who the city of Athens is, and what all just the standard demographics and all of that. So we're looking at, we also found I had data from 2000, so we've got, I think, 30 years worth of census, 20 years, but 3 census periods. So
Very good.
thank you, that's all. If
Very
anybody
good.
has questions.
When you get to the point where you're asking what people imagine or would like to see the Hocking River look like, my 2 cents would be no more floating bottles and crystal clear.
Yeah.
That's not a reality. All right. Our next meeting will be November 4th here in council chambers at 12 o'clock, and pending no other business or announcements.
I'd like to just say something. I assume that next meeting will have the developers of the apartments over on Union, near, I guess, Lurig Road and 682 back to visit with us. I feel that they kind of, I feel like they were deceptive. I didn't realize, and maybe I'm off base and I'm wrong about this, but I felt like what they came forward with was basically a 2-building project, and that's what they were going to develop. And now all of a sudden they're adding 2 more buildings to it, and it's a 4-building project. And I don't remember ever seeing anything dotted in on the plan saying future buildings, or I don't remember anybody ever telling me that, hey, look, in the future, if everything goes well, our plan is to double the capacity of this complex. And so we never had a chance to look at that. And I'm a little disappointed now that they're coming back here. They aren't even out of the ground yet. They are starting some work there. But, all of a sudden now they want to go ahead and do a second phase. That concerns me. I'd like to better understand from them why we were not informed that there was a much broader project or bigger project envisioned here.
Was there traffic, oh, sorry, Nancy.
No, go ahead.
Was there traffic study done with all 4? Because
Yeah, the one.
what
by
they
the-
had, the traffic study was for the 2 buildings, not for the 4.
And
so-
Little Fish was a place where they counted, on the road. That one just kind of made me giggle, but,
Armitage Road.
yeah, Armitage. But in addition,
Oh,
to
here.
sort of back up what John is saying, I'm I wondered what it was, why it was set up that way, and it was all one owner, and then they split off two, and then they split off some more. It seems like it almost should be a planned unit development. I mean, and then they have two separate name sets. On one they have Woda, and the other one they have Woda and somebody else. And there's a discrepancy I'd like to explore.
When
mean,
this
it's-
comes forward, I don't know, is this potentially slated for the November 4th meeting?
They've asked for some time, so I don't know for sure that it's
Okay.
going to come on the 4th of November. We did have a preliminary site plan meeting with them, with all of, I think with Andy Stone and Paul Logue, and Jessica, and we had some discussions about that. I don't want to speak for the developer, but they did have some reasoning for your concerns, that I think they should speak to you about
Yeah.
that.
These are all good questions, and the questions that we can certainly have
It's good to have
with
time.
this case as it comes forward, because it'll come forward as a communication first, correct?
Yes.
And then migrate into a
Okay,
case. So we
okay.
have plenty of time to have that conversation.
Okay.
Maybe.
Multiple opportunities.
Well, yeah.
I appreciate that. It was interesting to see it being two buildings, and then they doubled
Right.
in the number.
And as I recall, the rents went up on the second phase, and they had a different set of owners. It was Woda da-da-da, whoever, it was a.
Woda Cooper.
Woda Cooper, yeah.
Right, so the idea of deceleration lanes or, acceleration lanes coming in and out of the complex, or how you come in and, I think those are important things now that we're going from about 100 units to about 180, 190 units. And so I think that's something, I think, was it Mr. Stone who talked about access to the bicycle path, and maybe, so that they, people can walk or ride their bicycles and get safely over to West State Street, or to that walking and cycling system we have in this community, which is such a great asset. I think I'd like them to really look hard at doing something like that. I think Andy was pushing in that direction, and Mr. Stone, and I really think it's a good idea.
Yeah, there was the pedestrian sidewalk was something
Yeah.
that Director Stone has brought up on multiple occasions, and has mentioned that to Woda Group. And the other is reaching out to the Ohio Department of Transportation about reducing the speed
Speed.
from 45 to 35.
Right.
Unfortunately, the way ODOT operates is that they're always more reactive than being
Correct.
proactive, because they have to be able to do the full study when an area does see an increase in the population. We did press them to see, can we do something more proactively? Because we
Right.
know if there's going to be X number of units, that here's how much it's going to increase. And then the other piece of this equation, which is interesting, is all, most of you are aware, is
Johnson
the
Road.
closure of Johnson Road.
Absolutely, and it's pushing traffic in two different directions that would normally have come out on 33. It's pushing it down toward Union Street, and it's taking it the other way through the Plains, and I think it's ultimately it's having a major impact, in terms of traffic on 682 there near this
They haven't
development.
seen anything yet, though, have they?
No.
I mean, this is.
So anyway,
Great.
yeah, anyway. But
Right.
I just wanted to raise that before they came back, and, and make sure that all members and all people involved, know that I got a concern there.
Sure.
And Austin's neighbors will probably have something to say. I mean, I would.
See,
We'll see.
I mean, it's gonna change their lives.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, that concludes today's
Good meeting.
meeting of the Planning Commission.
Good meeting.